Hello and welcome to Grody and Unprofessional. My name is Justin McMenamy and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons I have acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, we discuss making ads and ultra running, but rarely at the same time. We also pick through eBay's illogical policies regarding the sale of human remains and the self-help book, You Are Dumber Than You Think You Are. Andy Pearson, welcome to Grody and Unprofessional. It is so good to have you join us today for a conversation.
Thanks for having me. I feel both things.
I think today we're going to talk on a number of topics. I'm sure we're going to cover marketing. We might just cover ultra running as well. And then also we're going to talk about the company that you work for currently, Liquid Death. But as we get started, I have a special request. You and I both know a guy by the name of Jeff Snowden, and I have talked to him on the phone a number of times over the last couple of months, and every time I talk to him, he says, "You've got to get Andy to tell the story about the time he sold his mustache on eBay." That's where I guess we've got to start.
That's the starting place. Mind. Sure.
Tell us the story.
There's not a story. It was, this was my first and a half job. I was living in Boulder, Colorado at Crispin Port Bogusky, kind of my first permanent job. And for some reason, I had come across the policy on eBay that you could not sell human body parts.
Yeah.
And in fact, maybe this came from, I discovered you could buy a lot of taxidermy on eBay. Well, okay, there is more story here, I guess. So I discovered you could buy taxidermy. I was like, hell yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then you look at what taxidermy costs, being that it was my first job and I'm making like $40K a year. I was like, I can't afford any of this cool stuff, but I can afford these squirrels that are $50. So I just bought like a squirrel off eBay and had one, and then like I found another one wearing a silly hat or something and bought another one, and then suddenly I got a reputation as the taxidermy squirrel guy, and so then people are like buying me taxidermy squirrels and sending them to me. So my office begins filling with like only taxidermied squirrels. So that's probably where I became aware of the eBay policy, I would assume. And so I was like, well, body parts, what constitutes a body part? At the time, I had a giant handlebar mustache because it was 2008. And so I was like, I wonder if I can sell this for profit on eBay. So after growing it out, I waxed it up. And one day I went and I shaved it off underneath very carefully. I was able to, it came off in kind of two pieces since there's sort of a seam in the center. But it came off in pieces, and I packaged it up and I put it on eBay to see if I could sell it. And someone ended up buying it for, I think, $20 off eBay. So it was beer money. And then I actually went back and did it again. This time I put a little more effort. I like mounted it like it was a trophy fish, and I had like a little a spray paint gold plaque and a little inscription and stuff, and I sold that and made it another $20. So I was like thinking that could have been my real side hustle, but turns out not that many people want to buy a random kid's mustache off of eBay, but not outside of policy.
Was the photograph attached to your face, or was it after it had been detached and mounted that you put the pictures on?
Oh, there's a video. I actually made a full video explaining it, which was probably overkill at the time. But you know, I had a lot of creative energy and didn't know what to put it into, apparently.
I mean, it's a renewable business. That is
well,
true.
That's what I was. I was like, maybe this will be maybe I can make money this way. And then the return was not what I had hoped, but also didn't get taken down. So it was a victory.
Some people donate platelets early in their career. Other people sell their mustaches.
Yeah.
Which apparently is not a body part. We will put that in the record.
Yes. Let it be known.
Andy, if you wouldn't mind, share a little bit about your background. Currently, you are the creative director at Liquid Death, but you've had a number of stops along the way through your career.
Yeah. I started as a zygote at an early age, and then have recently become a creative director. I went to school. I actually went to the University of Georgia, which is where I met Jeff Snowden. He was an alum and had started his own agency there in Athens, Georgia, and kind of got to know him as a mentor. But yeah, I went to UGA, went on to a place called the Creative Circus. That was an advertising art school, portfolio school for creatives. And then briefly went to Wieden Kennedy in Portland, which I was very lucky to get to go to through a crazy chain of events involving a bake sale and an international award show. Then went to Crispin Porter Bogusky in Colorado for about 5 years. Ended up moving out to LA as we expanded into LA. Really learned amazing stuff there. Got to learn under the advertising Jesus, Alex Bogusky. Quite literally, he looked like it, and he sort of was building a cult, and he had long hair, and really learned everything there under some incredible people at Crispin. I ended up taking a job at Deutsch LA, where I got to be a creative director on Volkswagen, which was, was on such a storied brand, was really cool. From there, I actually quit my job, and my wife and I, who does the same thing that I do, she and I went and traveled a year, put our whole life on hold, and sublet our apartment, and just went all over Southeast Asia and spent a summer in Amsterdam and traveled all over the place and just took time off. And through that process, ended up freelancing a bunch, saw the inside of a ton of different agencies, learned a ton through freelancing. And then about a year in, I got a text out of the blue from Mike, who was the founder of Liquid Death and had been doing all the creative himself for the early years of Liquid Death. Asked me what I was up to and if I was interested in coming aboard. And that was about 4.5 years ago that I joined Liquid Death. So that is the full biography.
As you went from different agencies and have been a part of different organizations, were there agencies that you felt like you fit? I don't know the ad space that well. Are there ones that you fit in better? Like, what are the DNAs of different agencies, and how do they approach marketing and advertising in different ways? And what were ones that you fit with and other ones that didn't fit as well?
Every place has its own flavor, and it's partly pedigree of that agency over the years as they've grown. It's part of the vision of the leadership, what kind of things that they put importance on, what sort of their philosophy to making great work is. If they even have a philosophy that great work is an important thing. Like I said, I was really lucky. I went to this place, Wieden, who, if you haven't heard that name, they basically invented Nike back in the 80s. They do incredible work. They're always one of the top agencies in the world every single year. They're very artistic in their approach. So, my time there, it was like referencing all these directors' work, these film directors and musical references, and we're going to work with this artist and to do this. As much as I appreciate that stuff, that is not the way that I think. And so it was really eye-opening to be somewhere and be like, I know this is cool and these people are cool, but I do not connect with the kind of work that's being made. And then conversely, after a crazy thing where I got laid off from a position that had been hired for the day before, I ended up at this place, Crispin Porter in Colorado. They at the time were just the most insane, incredible agency in the world for years and years. We won like Agency of the Decade. We were given that designation at one point while I was there. Their philosophy was totally opposite. It was more about making an insane idea and sort of just like putting it out in the world, versus the place I was before was about making something beautiful that maybe didn't have like a core idea. It was like a really beautiful piece of art or an expression. Yeah. But this other place was like, grip it and rip it. Let's just like come up with something insane, go out and shoot it guerrilla style, or like shoot it like a reality TV show, or just put some insane idea. And so once I got there, I was like, oh, this is the kind of stuff that I connect with. And what I loved about that place is it had such a formed sense of what it was doing and the people there. Everybody across the board was pulling in the same direction. And that's not something that you see at ad agencies a lot. I think historically it's like, oh, the account people are coming in to tell me what to do and the creatives don't want to listen. And there's this kind of banging of heads. And this place was totally opposite. There was such a real sense of self there. Other places I went that didn't exist. And to be honest, there was like a real void I felt, where there wasn't a centralized philosophy on what made good work and why we wanted to do it. And people were coming to Crispin at the time to like get some of that energy, get that thing that they were doing. And that was great because people were coming to us wanting that. And so you could work with somebody and really push the work there. versus like when someone's just like, oh, I heard you guys make ads. Let's make some ads together. There's like less of a foundation to build on. I interviewed at a place where I asked, hey, so what is the special thing that makes it special here? Like, what is the philosophy on the work and why we're trying to make it great? And the person was just like, I don't know, man, just make it good. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a red flag for me, because I understood that I needed somewhere where I like believed the team was all doing this together and we had a shared vision. And then I ended up taking the job. And then I got there and I was like, oh, in retrospect, I should have known better. I knew at the time that was a red flag and I didn't act on it. I'm sure it's happened to you. It happens so many times. And I've gotten so much better about like, anytime something is a red flag, I'm immediately like, that's it. Not doing that, because I know I've looked back in hindsight on so many of those things. So that was one case where I was just like, there's no guiding principle, and I think I need to have that. And I'm lucky because that's what I stepped into at Liquid Death, and that's what we've been really building over here as well.
And do you think it's because different agencies are different ages, or they're led by different personalities? I'm sure there's agencies that it's really about the bottom dollar, not that the accountant is the CEO, but there's a very much a P&L centric, and you talked about one agency that it really was maybe more about the art side of it, and then another one's like, hey, let's have an experience. Those are genetics that I see in product companies, the domain that I live in. I'm guessing you see similar emergent motivations, if you will, between different ad agencies as well.
Yeah, and it's honestly when there's a strong person or people at the top that have a really strong sense of self. For me in particular, I find it's people who have a bone to pick with the world. I think the places, Liquid Death included, Crispin included, were like people who were more sort of a little bit like, F the way everybody else is doing. That way is old and dumb and hacked. Let's do something that makes fun of that, or that takes advantage of what everybody else is doing. That sort of philosophy has always appealed to me anyway, which is like, anytime everyone's doing something, it is ripe for satire, and it's ripe for you to come in and provide a totally different perspective. Those are the places that have a specific philosophy often, because it's like you have to have an enemy to understand who you are. You have to have something you're pushing off against. You can't just be like, la, 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 we're great at this. You have to be like, that sucks over there. Let's do the opposite of that, or let's do it different, because everybody is doing that thing that we know is not that great. You know? Yeah.
So if you had to describe the ethos or the culture of Liquid Death and the advertising that you guys have taken, how would you describe the status quo or the enemy? Or what is it that you're pushing off of to help define who you guys are?
Yeah, I mean, we're always like, marketing sucks. No one likes marketing. We're in the marketing industry. 99.9% of people, if you're like, would you like to see less marketing in your life or more marketing? Everyone's going to be like, yeah, I don't want to see ads, right? That's something that it feels like a lot of the industry ignores. It's like, look at this beautiful commercial we made that's going to interrupt the thing that you were just trying to watch anyway. Isn't it wonderful? And it's like, no, it interrupted the thing I'm trying to do, or it's trying to take my money away from me, right? So if you start from that place of acknowledging that's the thing that we're making, suddenly maybe you start making something differently that actually attempts to respect the people on the receiving end of it, or entertains them, or something like that. So we always talk about, we want to make entertainment, not marketing. That's sort of central to our marketing standpoint, our marketing sort of philosophy. But even beyond that, I think the interesting premise behind Liquid Death, I always say, is that there's always a better way to do everything. Like I said, that applies to marketing. It's like, hey, make stuff that people genuinely want to watch versus stuff that they're forced to watch, or whatever it is. We were one of the very first to put water in a can in a time when literally 20,000 plastic bottles are created every second, right? That was a result of essentially this whole marketing strategy for bottled water since the very beginning, was this idea of purity, and that you had to see it. And in order to see it, obviously it has to be in a clear container, and to be in a cheap, clear container, it has to be in plastic. And so no one had really bothered to question the strategy of the way you market water ever. And so we come along and we're like, what if we put it in aluminum cans, and this thing that is healthy because it's not full of calories, it's not alcoholic, whatever, make something that, quote unquote, like a health product make it feel unhealthy, make it actually feel fun for a change. So that was kind of simultaneously like, can we change the way products are literally produced and make that better? And then simultaneously, can we look at the way that healthy products are marketed and make that better? Yeah, I think every step along the way and everything we do here, it's like the question is, why do we have to keep doing it the way that everyone's been doing it for the whole time? Maybe there's a reason, but maybe people are just path of least resistance or haven't bothered to think of this. And so we always talk about like, what's the dumbest thing we can do? That's actually always a good starting place for us is literally be like, what is the dumbest thing we can do in this situation? Because 9 times out of 10, it'll be something so stupid no one has even bothered to think of it yet. And no one would even entertain that idea. So let's entertain something that is wildly stupid and totally illogical for where the world is now. But can we find a real logic in that? And so that's actually the way that I approach the creative work as well with my team. We're like, let's come up with the dumbest idea we can, and then let's work backwards and try to make it make sense. Because now we're suddenly starting from a place that no one has ever bothered to start in from a creative standpoint. So that's kind of encapsulating of a lot of what we're trying to do with Liquid Death.
That's cool. I remember you posted recently about marketing and interrupting people's lives and begging them for money. I think your analogy was somebody walking through the woods and somebody jumps out of the bush to ask you or tell you to give them your money. We call them a burglar. We call them a robber. We call them a pickpocket. But how much more entertaining would it be if somebody jumped out of the bush and tried to tell you a joke, tried to entertain you? You would be more willing to break from what you were trying to do to see this. And I thought that was a really creative way to say that's what's happening as you're going through your day, is people are just jumping out of the bushes begging for your money. Or
I'm always like, it's like you're walking to your car, you're getting in your car, and then someone's like, hey, here's 10 things you need to know about us. It's eco-friendly. It's this. Now give us your money. And you're like, what? I was just walking to my car, man. It's like getting mugged all the time, all day. It's not a way to live, but that is the human condition. It's always like death, taxes, and marketing. For us, when we can make fun of marketing, a lot of the stuff we do is satire of marketing itself. That stuff always does the best because it's universally hated by all humans. No matter who you are, you have that experience and you know what it's like. I say it's like in this world where media is becoming more and more fractured, where we're not all watching the same TV shows or listening to the same music or consuming the same whatever. We all still get served the same dumb ads that we all hate, or we all know that like stupid infomercial that always would play or whatever. So it is like this kind of this weird shared human condition that unites us all in a weird way that is really nice for us to play with and hopefully turn it around and make people smile with it instead.
Absolutely. One thing that you also have shared that is a big passion of yours is ultra running. One of the posts you said you make ads and you run, but you rarely do them at the same time. So I'm interested, how did you come into ultra running?
It's actually connected to making ads, weirdly enough. When I was at the same job in Boulder, Boulder, for anyone who hasn't been, it's right at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And the job that I was so fondly talking about earlier was also a terrible job because we just worked in the most insane conditions. I don't think I left the office before 11 o'clock ever, 11 o'clock at night. And then I'd go home and I'd be in my bed till 2 or 3 in the morning, like sending emails until I like finally passed out, and then would wake up a couple hours later and have to go to the office again. First 5 months there, I didn't have a single day off, including weekends. So I worked for literally 5 months straight. The flip side of that is why we're doing such great work is because it was just a total sweatshop. That was the part of what made it great, but what made it such a terrible place for the people that work there. I'd always kind of enjoyed running, but I'd never really gotten into it. And at some point I was just like, I woke up like hungover one morning on like a Saturday, and I was like looking up at the mountains, and because they're right there, and you're like, I feel like I should just be up in those things, like doing something. And so I just started hiking by myself, and then I started running a little bit more. And then I read this book called Born to Run, which is not a Bruce Springsteen biopic, but it's all about this philosophy, or this theory, I guess, that human beings evolved as a running species and were adapted to actually run. If you look at some of the evolutionary physiology, the idea that if you look at the foot, it's this amazing piece of engineering. And until extremely recently, in terms of biological times, we have never worn shoes. We've never needed to wear shoes because the foot is designed as it is. So it was kind of this like, interestingly, this anti-running shoe book at the time, and kind of espousing this idea that humans were actually evolved to run long distances. Anyway, it hit me at a time where I was like, sure, let's do it. And and I kind of jumped in because it was so accessible, but it was so extreme that it was the opposite of the extremeness of my job, working all these crazy hours, and then I'd go out and run in the mountains for 4 or 5 hours at a time on the weekend. I don't think I understood at the time, but in retrospect, I was doing these two very extreme things that I was like, well, these two things cancel each other out, I guess. It helped me kind of get some perspective on things. And in later years, I realized it's kind of really almost a form of like moving meditation. So I went from not even having an idea of what I was doing at all to kind of, I accidentally ran my first marathon. I just signed up for one because I was like, well, I'm basically training for one. I'm basically trained for one, so I might as well do one. So I ran a trail marathon up in Oregon. And then the next year I went out and ran my first 50 miler. And then the next year I went out and ran my first 100 miler. And then cut to today, and I've done probably 25 to 30 100-mile or beyond distances, and a bunch of 200-mile races. And one race I ran across the entire state of Tennessee. It was like a 314-mile race on the side of the highway with no aids. So we're just like sleeping in driveways and gas stations. And I've had all kinds of insane adventures doing this ultra running thing that are just so bizarre that it's I love doing it. It allows you to experience things that very few human beings get to experience. And unless you do drugs, which I don't. So I was like, well, at least I kind of get the same thing, but I just have to work harder, I guess.
This is the runner's high is what you're talking about?
I actually have no idea what the runner's high. People always say that. And I'm like, I don't understand what that thing is.
I've never had that happen, unless it's a cramp in your side that makes you want to fall over. If that's the runner's high, then I've had that before.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not saying this is why I do it, but I've had like severe hallucinations during races where you've been running for 3 days straight and all the rocks that you're looking at the ground suddenly turn into zombie Barack Obamas. And you're like, what?
Hey, as long as they're rooting you on, I guess it's fine.
When I start seeing skulls in all the rocks, I'm like, I need to lay down and sleep for 5 minutes. I've been up for several days. But no, more so like you just get such insane experiences by choosing to put your body and mind through these challenges. You get to have these wild experiences out in nature and with yourself, and kind of like going both outward and inward simultaneously.
I think it's Winston Churchill that is quoted as saying that a person who labors with his mind should hobby in exercise, and a person that labors with their body should hobby with their mind. And so it is interesting. Like you talk about working all these hours, and it's a creative and it's a mental exercise. And there is actually, I think, some precedent for physical exertion is actually a restorative mechanism for the burnout or for the wear down that's happening on the mental side.
Absolutely.
I think there might be something there. Yeah.
I'm going to write a self-help book one day. I hate self-help books. So I feel like I could write a real banger if I sat down and wrote one about like ultra running perspective on self-betterment and stuff. Whenever I have the time, that'll be what I do.
It's the same reason you went into marketing, because of how bad all of the other marketing is. So why not go into a self-help book for the same reason?
100%. That's what I'm saying, man. That's how selling mustaches didn't work out, but self-help books will. That's my hope.
Knowing you for now about 30 minutes, I'm guessing you have a working title for your self-help book. Is it a good one?
I don't. You're putting me on the spot.
Oh, man.
You can be dumber than you think you are. And I'll show you how, by Andy Pearson.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'll be the first one in line.
Okay.
So I heard a story. This is another Jeff Snowden.
Okay.
He's like, hey, make sure you ask him about.
Okay.
He mentioned that there is someone that challenged you to an ultra marathon as an effort to get an interview.
Yeah.
Is this true?
Yeah, this happened about almost exactly a year ago. To kind of tie this all together, I was really trying to keep my running and advertising professional life separate. And then in recent years, I've found them crashing together more and more. So there's this app called Strava, which is basically like most like I was going to say serious runners. Apologies if you're a runner and you don't use it. But most runners and cyclists out there use this app called Strava to track their mileage, and it's sort of a vaguely social platform as well. One day, this guy just started tagging me in these activities he was doing, and I was like, I'm challenging you to a race to the death. I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. And, I get a lot of people approaching me. I don't say this in a bragging way. I just, because of our visibility of what we do, I get approached a lot by people wanting to work or people with us or jobs, or I always get pitches like constantly. And so I was just like, hey, whatever.
Random podcasters from Illinois, right? I mean, it just happens all the time.
Yeah. And so I was like, whatever. Then he like posted this video, and it was him running, and he was like, my name is Aiden Haas, and I'm a copywriter in New York City and an endurance athlete, and I'm challenging you to a race to the death. He was kind of a triathlete, and his premise was that he was challenging me to an ultra marathon of my choice. And if he beat me, I had to give him a job. Full stop. Okay. There was no other part to it. It wasn't like, and if you win, I'll do. It was just like, if I beat you. And I was like, I don't know if you know how deals work, man. But so I kind of ignored it. And I also looked up this guy, and I couldn't really, I was like, he doesn't really even have a job. I can't even find a portfolio, because if you want a position as a ad creative, you'll have like a portfolio of work that you can show off your stuff. And I was like, this guy doesn't have anything. So I just ignored it. And then he kept tagging me, and his friends are tagging me, and all this like talking shit on my account. And they're all in New York, and they're all like road runners and triathletes, which there's not like a beef, but like trail runners, we know we're just better people than road runners. Not that we're like necessarily better runners, but we're just not that. And then runners in general, we don't like cyclists. You're just like, okay, you guys are too much. And then add to that, like triathletes, you're like, man, you guys like have wetsuits and these so there's a whole range of people that we think are dumb. But like, he was a triathlete and a road runner in New York, and I was like, nah, man. So anyway, I wasn't going to reply to it, but turns out I have my own stupid podcast, a comedy and ultra running podcast called Between Two Pines, and we needed content that month. And I was just like, all right, whatever, we need a segment. I'll just say that I accept this challenge. So I accepted it. And turns out this guy he was a student in a portfolio program similar to the one that I had done. And so that's why he didn't have any work to show. So on top of all this, I was like, if you had said you were a student, I would have helped you out, man. Right. But like, you just were like, hi, give me a job.
And you're like, total road runner. That's a total road runner behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Real road runner energy. And so I was like, all right, man. Oh, and the joke was race to the death being liquid death, of course. So I told him that I accepted. However, the deal was if he beat me, I would look at his portfolio, since he didn't even have one to begin with. Because I was like, I don't have jobs to give out. Like literally, there's no jobs. We're a very small department. And if I beat him, he had to buy me some beers after the race, a 6-pack of beer. And so very low stakes. And the only race that I have open that you could get into this year is this one that's in 3 months' time, maybe, in southern Utah and Kanab, called Utah 115. So as a first-year race, 115 miles over what turned out to be like 80% sand, like just straight up sand. And of that 80%, probably 80% of that 80% was like deep sand. Like,
oh my,
one step is equal to about 3 steps worth of effort. It was bonkers. And so this poor kid in New York is training and he's never run more than a marathon. And he was training for this race on sand in the desert of Utah. That's 115 miles, where he's going 90 more miles basically than he's ever done in his life. But he did scare me. It kicked my ass into training, and we had a good rivalry going into it. And so I was a little bit scared. We showed up, and yeah, I just totally dusted him. I actually won the race outright. It was a small race, but I won the race, and he ended up taking 2 wrong turns at like mile 25. He took his first wrong turn, and then he took another one later and went like 7 miles off course and had to drop. He got I think he got 45 miles or something in ultimately when all was said and done, but he made it back safe, which I was a little worried about, to be honest.
Right.
And
take the race to the death just a little too literally.
I was running and I was like, this is a pretty serious race. This is not an easy race. And some of these sections are really hard to follow and you can get pretty lost pretty quickly, which he did, I guess. Yeah. So I won and I was like passed out afterwards because you've been up running for 28 hours. And so the next day and I'm like passed out on the ground and he walks up with 2 sixers of beer and hands them to me. And I had a little coupon that I'd Sharpied that was a coupon for a free portfolio review. So I handed that to him. Anyway, just to be nice. He hasn't cashed in yet, but we actually are friends now. And last time I was in New York, we went out for a big run around Central Park together and we're like kind of pals now.
That's cool. Andy, is there a place or an activity or a thing that you do for max creativity? Is there a zone that you've found that you're like, man, if I need to crack a creative nut, this is where I go, what I do?
I tell everyone to leave me alone and I cancel all my meetings. I'm just like, you know what's funny is airplanes. I travel a little bit. I get asked to go to conferences and speaking stuff. And I kind of love doing it, honestly, because I'm like, cool, I'm going to be in the air for 4 hours and no one can get in touch with me if I don't want them to. Amazing. I'm going to get all my work done. One of the first things I did when I joined here, we were very small. And so I just got to make up whatever I wanted to. And I was like, no meeting Fridays. We're not going to have any meetings on Friday. And it's like still my favorite thing because it's just like the day that I can actually, like today, unless you're recording podcasts, you can sit down and you can write all the scripts that you need to do and do all the stuff. So I love that, which is a really boring answer. But then, I have different playlists on Spotify that I'll listen to depending on what I'm trying to do. So like I have one like chill work if I'm having to write like a bunch of long form copy, or if I'm like concepting new ideas, I have a different one. And there's not really any rhyme or reason. It just is like the energy that I'm kind of like putting in. They're all like wordless music, but of different types. So I use music a lot to zone me out and get into the right headspace to do what I want to do.
That makes sense. For me, it's actually the shower. For some reason, in the shower is extremely creative. The hard part is taking notes in there.
I know.
Like, I'm like, okay, I got to remember this. I got.
Don't they have like underwater paper? Like I've seen it on like science shows where they're doing like underwater archaeology and they're writing stuff down. You could look into that. Maybe
I'm gonna have to either that or just get the Sharpie, but just write really high on the wall above the water. Yeah, and then come back and take a photograph later. I get stuff sometimes when I'm running, and I'm like, oh, I need to remember that because I'll be out on a run for an hour and a half in the morning. And I'm like, remember that, and then I get to my car and it's all gone. It sucks completely. Yeah, it sucks. I have the same issue. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm like on an elliptical machine, I'm not nearly an ultra marathon runner, but I'll be on the elliptical machine and I'm trying to text myself while on the elliptical machine, and the message that results is gobbledygook, and I'm like, I had no idea what that said. A similar version of that is like sometimes I'll be by myself at an airport. I'm like, I'll have some beers and write stuff, because I always, in a weird way, admire all the great artists who could get hammered on various substances and then make amazing art. And I'm like, Hemingway was just drinking rum and writing novels. And I was like, I'll do that. And then I have like 2 beers and I'll sit down and I'll just start, pen is flowing. And then you look back the next day and I was like, what is this? This is just total garbage. That means absolutely nothing. I like, even in college, I had a really dumb band. We were like a Tenacious D ripoff called Obsequious. Originally Obsequious D that we shortened just to Obsequious because we thought it was too on the nose. Even then I was like, if I had like 1 beer before a show, I just couldn't play my instrument whatsoever. It's so uncool to like be like, I can't drink beer and play music, because that's what all the greats did. And so I've just learned, I was like, the substances and any sort of creativity just do not mix with me whatsoever. So I'm always not envious, but I'm always like kind of impressed by people who can do that kind of thing, because I cannot. Right. One of the things I wanted to chat with you about, another post that you had done recently, you talked about a little bit the process of, you said, gently nurturing ideas to grow and mature. And then one day you brutally rip them out of their growing capsules and produce them into giant productions. And I love the visual, but what I'm also interested in, and you would experience this every day, there is this creativity and this like very careful nurturing of creativity. And then there's just, you've got to do it. You've got to, there's production schedules and there's people that got to be involved. And how have you and your team bridged that gap? Is it the same people that are able to be good at both? Is there a handoff? I'm really fascinated by organizations that are creative organizations, whether it's product development or marketing. There is a certain group of people and mindset that's really good at that.
Yeah.
And then there's another people that are just like, here's the schedule, do this, do this, do this. How do you navigate being good at both as a team or as an organization?
Yeah. It's funny. You're referring to the job description that I wrote for a production coordinator. It was very tongue in cheek, but people seem to like it. It really isn't the thing that I'm describing where you're like gently nurturing these ideas and then suddenly you have to turn around and make them. I think in a lot of ways, our process here is very much the opposite of that, which is sort of like one big, long, messy process. And I use messy in the most positive way I possibly can here.
Of course.
I'm not good at like having things final. I think a lot of people here aren't either. Every step of the process is a chance to continually refine and punch up and make it better. And so I don't think that's the way that a lot of places operate. I find it happens in two different ways in opposite directions, which is on the front of an idea when we're working on stuff, not having the idea fully cooked or defined is totally okay. We're just like, hey, this is sort of the general, this is like the idea. It's going to be something like this. And I think we're lucky enough where we've gotten with Liquid Death where we're feeling we can confidently be like, yes, that's the right area. We feel like anything that we make can be great. So as long as we feel like we have the right general neighborhood that we're in here with this, let's just keep going with it. So we kind of have internally greenlit stuff where it's like we don't have a script. We present work to people all the time, to external partners or whatever, where we're like, I don't know, it'll be something like this. We're very lackadaisical on the front end. So at least it gives us time to be like, okay, well, how would we approach this? Now that we've decided this is the idea, like a lot of times I'll bring in my production team, my producers, and we'll kind of start talking about it at that point. So rather than traditionally be like, we're going to come up with the idea, then we'll have a script. We're going to present the script that we want to make. The script will go through all these revisions. There's going to be all these rewrites and rounds of work with the client. You know, this is how an agency would work. And then once it's approved and all the budget is approved, then it moves into production. It's handed to these people. Now these people take it and then it gets passed off to the production company. Now the production company, and it keeps getting handed off. And ours is just totally opposite, where it's like, we're like, we kind of have this idea. We'll figure out the script. It'll be something like this. And then as we look at the production of how we do it, a lot of times like the process of thinking about how we might shoot it or where we might go or whatever, that will open new doors on like, oh, this could be the way that maybe we handle it, or maybe we write it like this, or now that I'm thinking through this, here's a more interesting take on it. And so it's really this like kind of continuum. And we're lucky where, because we don't work with any agencies or production houses, we do it all 100% in-house ourselves. We get to control, and so we see that process, and so we can let it be mushier and develop over time. It's gotten to the point where now we also direct like 95% of the work in-house, I'd say. Pretty much everything. In fact, myself or one of the other creatives here have basically directed or co-directed everything we've done for the last like 3.5 years, with the exception of last year's Super Bowl spot and this coming Super Bowl spot. We brought in some additional director for that. But other than that, we do it all ourselves. And it's mostly just out of like laziness, because it actually is, it's actually more work for us to bring in somebody and be like, hey, here's what we're thinking on it. And then they suddenly have their own pitches on it and they want to do it this way. And they're coming at it from a different angle. And we have to kind of all figure out to meet in the middle. Versus us, we have such a clear idea of what we want to make and how we want to make it, that we're just like, this is how it should be. And so I turned into an accidental director, because they were just like, well, we don't have any money on this project and you know what it should be. So why don't, we'll help you kind of figure out how to do it. And then the next project started, and then I'm like, oh, I'm just directing things now. But because we were developed as a team, now we're in production as a team, now we're directing it as a team, and then we go into post-production and edit together. In all those times, we're leaving space open to keep punching up the thing. Even on the day of the shoot, I'm always like, I don't know, we'll come up with an idea on set. I'm very kind of like loose on some of the details, because I want to have room to like spark an idea when we're standing there. We're like, oh, what'd be funny is if this happened. I always want to leave a lot of space for that kind of thinking. And that's not something that you can do when you don't control the production or you don't control the shoot yourself, because you have to get approval for this and you have to talk to 3 people to make it. So yeah, I love that we get to do all the pieces because we get ultimate control. And again, it's not like a control freak thing. It's just that I think we see opportunities that other people don't see sometimes. Yeah. And we leave some stuff on the table, most assuredly, by that. The other part of it is we can do things way faster and for way cheaper than if we were relying on other people. Like we save so much time and money and effort by doing it ourselves, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's true.
No, Andy, I fully agree with everything you said. A lot of the organizations I've worked at in my career have been smaller organizations, similar style, where you have personalities that they understand the logistics and the X's and O's that need to happen, and they understand the creativity that happens. Yeah. And one of the things we used to say is delay decisions as long as possible. Most people say fully define it, get the script locked in, get the product spec locked in, get everything locked in, hire your independent disciplines to execute on the plan, and then any change we have to massively communicate between all the disciplines and make everything's lined up, versus what would be more of an extreme ownership, end-to-end ownership, where it's like, hey, we're going to delay decisions as long as possible. We got to be working on the biggest thing that's most important to impact the end, and make sure that's lining up. But it is counterintuitive when an organization is either discipline-based or background-based or organizationally structure-based, but it's not counterintuitive from the experience of, hey, we're a startup, we got to make this happen. Creativity does come in fits and spurts, and a lot of time it is on the spot where I hadn't thought of that. That's awesome. Let's go with that. And having the flexibility and the fluidity to adapt to the environment that's exposing itself.
But I do think the other thing is that on the front end, like what I was getting at too, was we're very decisive. For us, I guess it's not so much about delaying decisions as much as we're like, it's almost the opposite, where we're just like, cool, that's the idea, go for it. Like a lot of times, some of the ideas we have, you're always taught in creative, it's such a dig on something to be like, well, that's a first idea. It just means like it's the first thing that you come to mind. I can point to a ton of stuff we've done that people are like, this is the most insane, crazy idea. And it was literally the first idea we had, because we're already starting from such a wild place to begin with, what we're doing. But so when we see stuff, we are like, no, that's right. And we feel confident and we're like, cool, let's just move on that. So it's more about like once we know the thing, rather than like hemming and hawing over like, well, it could be this or it could be this. We like several of these ideas and we're going to get some opinions and we're going to kind of take some time. And we're like, no, that's it. Go do it. And then now we're just immediately in the process of doing it. And so the doing it is way more useful than the thinking about doing it, because
agreed.
Right. Yes. Because like you've gone from this theoretical stage to you're like, okay, now we've decided that we need to, for example, we've decided we need to give away a jet. Last summer, I think it was last summer, maybe it's 2 summers ago, we gave away a freaking fighter jet. For every can of Liquid Death you bought up to, I think, 2,000 cans, you got an entry to win a fighter jet.
Was this a mocking of the Pepsi jet from way back when?
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. We were like, cool, great, we're going to do it. Now, how do we figure out how are we going to do the thing we just said we wanted to do? That's where like all the creative stuff actually starts happening, because now you have to figure out the thing you've committed to. So that's what I mean is like, I like that part of the process, because suddenly now you're really doing it and you have to figure out what you've committed to and how you're going to make it work. And that's where like writing the script actually becomes more fun, and figuring out the production becomes more fun, and you can give yourself leeway to like do that stuff.
Yeah. I want to switch subjects here just a little bit. You've worked at agencies and you've worked for clients that are no risk, 5-iron right down the fairway. Just, we need a commercial. We don't want to offend anyone. We don't want to bother anyone. We just want them to buy our product, and we want anyone, any human being out there. We don't want to offend anybody. And then obviously your time at Liquid Death, you're just very like, this is who we are and this is how we're going to be. What do you think it is that moves an organization from one style to the other? Are there organizations that early in their life were charismatic and flamboyant and pushed the envelope and just over time they become more stale and stagnant? Or what leads an organization to go from one style to the other?
Yeah, I mean, there can be all kinds of things. I find that can be leadership style. I mean, it can be people. I worked, not bragging on people who live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I worked on like a client that was part of a corporation that was based in Dallas, and they were part of a bigger corporation that had other brands based elsewhere, that the people that we got to work for in California were like super rad and got it. And not turning this into like a red state, blue state thing. The people got what we were doing for the people that we were working for in one place. And then you'd go to the offices around Dallas and you'd be like, oh, of course these people don't get it. They look at what they're consuming and what's around them. Like, this is not like kind of the inspiring. So it could be as pedestrian and demographical as that, I guess. The other thing is like, the life cycle of a brand, of course. It's like, having been here at Liquid Death from days when basically we were getting on shelves for the first time to where we are now, I'm always like, oh, we've been like 8 different companies in the 4.5 years I've been here. Mm-hmm. I think what we're lucky with that is we are really retaining our perspective of where we came from. But you do see with like the development of a company that quickly is that you do get to see, oh, now we have this thing that we have to pull in. Now we have to consider this. Now there's this bigger skill set, or we have to be working on this. So it has given me some perspective where you understand every company is in a very different life phase, and they're going to have to react. So, but ultimately it comes down, there's no way to hide it. It's like, it comes down to the ultimate decision maker. At the end of the day, you're only as good as the person at the top making the decisions.
Sure.
And you see this all the time where it's like, oh man, this person got brought in to really make this place great. But meanwhile, they're sitting under somebody who is promising that they'll be unleashed to do all this stuff. And then you're like, well, what happened? They went there and nothing happened. That's so weird. They're so talented. It's like, well, they still had to get it approved by someone above them. So, we're insanely lucky that our chief decision maker is also a creative himself. And it's part of our secret weapon. That top decision maker is a really funny, creative, innovative dude who wants to make great work.
I was interested in the commercial, which was essentially pointing out to everybody that, hey, it's not alcohol. Mm-hmm. And it was done really creatively with the nun and with the surgeon, and it was done with the pilot. The thought that I had as I was watching that commercial is like, that's part of the evolution of a brand. There's this early phase of like, get on the shelf and get known. But I can imagine, you look at the can, and I've had conversations with people at work and they do think it's alcohol.
Yeah.
That probably emerges, not on day one when you're just trying to get on the shelf, but after you're on the shelf, that emerges as a headwind to sales. Is people truly don't understand that we're not alcoholic. You talk about the phase of the brand and you talk about the life cycle of the brand. There's a phase where it's like, just get known. Mm-hmm. And then there's a phase that's like, well, we have to clarify we're known, but maybe not known for exactly who we are at this point.
Yeah, totally. And that particular part of the brand has been one of the reasons why we've had such a success, is because, it does look like a can of beer or something. And so it's really fun. And so if you understand that, it's really fun to be walking around drinking it, or at a soccer game and everyone else thinks you're a degenerate for drinking this thing with a skull called Liquid Death. And so that's part of the fun. And then as more and more people get onto it, that kind of changes. And so we always kind of knew that was going to be part of it. The ad you're talking about was our Super Bowl spot last year. And we actually did a kind of a similar idea 2 years prior. We did another Super Bowl spot with a bunch of kids drinking it when we had just sold water before we got into all the flavored stuff and iced tea. And we ran a Super Bowl spot with a bunch of kids like partying with water, and they're like passing out and stuff. And it's set to a cover from Fat Mike of NoFX covering Breaking the Law. Judas Priest, and people hated that. But the fun of both that one and the one you're talking about, which felt like a beer ad, all these people are drinking, and the song was "Drink on the Job, Drink on the Job." We basically like studied a bunch of old Coors Lights commercials from like the 90s and used that and just did it essentially, but with our drink, and showing stuff that people could never do. But so the fun of that, both of those spots, was if you knew what Liquid Death was, you're like, that's hilarious, because I bet some other people don't know what that is, and it's very funny. And then if you didn't know what it was, suddenly you were horrified that there would be this terrible brand called Liquid Death telling people to drink on the job and showing people chugging while driving a school bus.
Or a surgeon.
Yeah. But then suddenly that leads to this really fun educational moment where they're in a room with someone and they're like, this is horrible. And then their nephew is like, that's a water company. And then it leads to this conversation. And we were told, even after the fact, I heard so many anecdotes about people were like, oh, I had to explain it to my aunt in that night of the Super Bowl. And we talked about it for literally 5 minutes after that.
Yeah.
We're always thinking through that stuff. We're not just trying to make an ad. We're like, literally, how are people going to receive this? What is going to be the reaction to it? And that goes back even to that place that I keep talking about in Colorado, Crispin Porter. This was always mind-blowing to me. They kind of developed this idea of the press release idea. And what that was normally when in advertising, you're just writing an idea. You're like, the idea is we're going to do whatever. The way that we were taught to, again, it was like a philosophy and a system that was developed. It was like the way that we're going to have to write up and present ideas internally and then ultimately to clients is we present the idea, we write it up as the headline that would run in a newspaper about the idea. So it's not just, here's the idea. It's like, how are people going to receive it? And it becomes immediately a litmus test for, could this really be something that would run as a real headline? Domino's, there's this big famous campaign that was done when I was there that was like Domino's relaunched their whole line of pizzas. And instead of talking about how great it was, they got focus groups and talk about how terrible the old pizza was.
I remember the ad.
Yeah. That was like the kind of idea. Or it'd be like, at the time when Facebook was kind of just emerging and Twitter was just emerging. There's this thing for Burger King called Whopper Sacrifice. It was so I still love this idea. It was an app on Facebook that you would install the app, and this is like early days. It was sort of Wild West. There weren't a lot of rules around what you could and couldn't do, and so we were developing all this stuff in house. Same thing. We're doing it all ourselves. We're not like farming it out. And I didn't do this, but I arrived right as this was being made. But the idea was, if you install this app, you get a free Whopper. But in order to do it, you had to sacrifice 10 of your Facebook friends. And so the app would literally, you'd have to go in and delete these friends on the app, and it would like have this animation where it like flame them and like the flame broiled Whopper. But then on top of that, it would send them a message that they had been deleted because their friend wanted a 10th of a Whopper. And it was like immediately it was like wildly against Facebook policy to like send other people notifications from an app they didn't install. But at the time, it got like all this crazy press for this like idea. And again, it started from literally like, what's the headline? It's like Burger King launches a Facebook app that lets you delete 10 friends to get a free Whopper. And so suddenly that's a much better way to frame an idea than to just be like the friend deletion app. We're going to build an app where it's like, no, if you're starting to think from how do we want people to think of this idea and receive it, you start coming up with different ideas and you start developing those ideas differently. And so even as a place like the Super Bowl where everyone's trying to make the funniest ad, I would wager our ad was definitely not the funniest. People are trying to entertain everybody. We're like, look how goofy we can be on the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But for ours, we were like, let's just make a really experiential piece of communication that isn't like itself is funny, but the whole idea surrounding it is like wild and funny as a premise and the way it works and relates to the world. So that's always how we are kind of thinking and developing ideas.
Yeah, it had dual purpose, right? As you said, to the insider, it was funny.
Yeah.
And it was funny because the insider perceived how the outsider was going to view it. And to the outsider, it was an educational experience.
Exactly.
So last question I have, there are a number of products that have some pretty strange names. I'm wondering if you've got an interesting story for the background of any of the product names.
Oh, man. I'm looking at my desk. You can't see, but just off camera, I have all the cans we've ever made sitting on my desk, and it is so many. Yeah, I have a couple, but I can't talk about them for legal reasons. I'm trying
a few of them we are contractually obligated not to talk about.
Yeah, those are the good ones. I mean, a lot of them are just, what is the not goofiest name? The naming thing is actually kind of interesting. It's kind of it's a tricky needle to thread when you're trying to make something that's like horror based, but funny, but communicates the flavor all in probably 2 words.
Correct.
And then at a certain point, you've just exhausted your list of all your various like horror movie weapons. And you have like, we kind of just have this sort of mental list of all these like terrible words we can use. So it's always a fun process where we're like, okay, we got to name this thing now. But yeah, the most fun stories I sadly cannot really talk about.
Well, you're not trying if you're not ending up in some lawyers' inboxes, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely makes it for some spicy fun around here.
Awesome. Andy, I can't thank you enough for the time you spent just sharing not just your own personal passions and backgrounds, but the ethos and the style that you guys have used. Obviously, you've made a dent in the industry. You're a conversation piece in the industry that doesn't come from just happenstance. There's an intentionality and a style behind it. And it's been awesome to get to know you and get to hear a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really fun to talk about all this stupid stuff I get to do for every day of my life.
Awesome. You have a good one.
You too, man. Thanks.
For those that wish to share praise, feedback, accolades, or large sums of money, you can reach me at justin@grody.io. For those with complaints, concerns, frustrations, or accusations, or if you would like to sign my eBay petition, which seeks to overturn the prohibition of selling human teeth, please send your support to P. Sherman, 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney, Australia. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.